Sitting in front of my bookshelves today because it is time for my monthly reading wrap-ups. I hope the lighting is going to be good. I normally like filming in my living room and in my kitchen because the lighting is just best in those two rooms in our apartment, but I kind of wanted to film in front of my bookshelves today because I'll be talking about books. So I thought it was fitting. Also trying to play with the angle a little bit. I don't know if I like this. Well, whatever. We'll just deal with it for this video. But I actually didn't upload a reading wrap-up for April. I think I only ended up reading 3 or 4 books in the month of April. I just didn't feel that was enough content for a whole video. So I decided to combine my April and my May reading wrap-ups together in just one video. Even then, I still think I only read 14 books between the month of May and April. So not a ton of books, but I did find some new favorites in this pile that I'm actually very excited to talk about. With that being said, should I start with my 5-star reads or should I start with my DNFs? I think I'm going to start off with my DNFs just to get them out of the way. I don't want to start this video on a negative note, but I always leave my DNFs till the end. So we're gonna switch things up a little bit today. I actually DNF'd all 3 of these books in April. 2 out of the 3, I actually plan to go back and read them. There was just one book in particular that I absolutely hated and I have no plans to go back to it. But the first 2 books that I DNF'd were Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and then I also DNF'd Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. These 2 are both very popular YA fantasy novels. I do plan on going back and reading them. I'll probably read them before the summer is over, but both of these books started off very slow. I don't even remember what page I DNF'd Powerless. I think I got to 100 pages. I don't know. I was enjoying it, but I also think that I was so busy in April that I didn't really have time to sit down and get into either of these 2 books. And I think that to read these 2 books, you have to be in a fantasy, cozy, slow world building mood because both of these, in my opinion, are pretty slow. I'm not blaming the books and I'm not blaming the authors. Like I did enjoy the writing. I just don't think I was in the right mindset, in the right mood to read these 2 fantasy books. I'm a huge mood reader and I have to be in the mood to read fantasy. Like I can't force myself to read fantasy, and I just wasn't in the right mood in April to read these 2 books, but I do plan on reading them hopefully before the summer is over. The 3rd book I DNF'd, I actually read through Libby, and I have to look up the name real quick. I ended up DNFing Shipped by Angie Hockman. DNF'd it at 40%, so 132 pages. The synopsis is said that it was the Unhoneymooners meeting the Hating Game, and I did get similar vibes to the Unhoneymooners because it was set on a cruise, very tropical vibes, but that's where the similarities ended. I just didn't really like the main character. She was so rude to the male main character. Even after he explained his reasonings for their not so meet cute, they just got off on the wrong foot, and even when he explained why they got off on the wrong foot, she was still very rude. And I just didn't like their chemistry. I didn't like their banter. It was just straight up mean. Couldn't connect with the female main character, so I ended up DNFing it instead of forcing myself to read it. I just don't have time to sit through a book that I know I'm going to end up hating, and I ended up giving it 1 star because I knew that I was just not going to vibe with that book. Now let's move on to a much more brighter discussion. Let's talk about my 5-star reads for April and May. I have 3 5 stars and 1 that was a 4.75, almost a 5-star rating. The most recent 5-star book that I read was To Kill a Shadow by Catherine Quinn. You guys, I absolutely loved this book. I bought this book on a whim during Amazon's book haul, I think 2 weeks ago. Didn't really expect anything from it. I haven't really seen anyone talk about this book here on BookTube or on Book Talk. I mean, maybe it is popular, I don't know, but I was really intrigued by the synopsis, and the book itself is so gorgeous. It has purple pages, the hardcover is white, which I absolutely love. It is a YA fantasy, even though it doesn't feel like a YA fantasy to me because the female main character is 18 years old and the male main character is 19, so they're young, but they're not super young. Normally YA fantasy books follow characters that are like 16 or 17. These characters are a little bit older, and even the side characters are a little bit older as well, but it follows 2 main characters. It follows a female main character, Kiera, and then a male main character named Jude. Jude is the commander of the Knights. He's actually the king's assassin as well. Whenever someone needs to get murdered in the kingdom, he's the one to carry out said murder. Everyone fears him, but Kiera is the one person who doesn't really fear him. She recently got recruited to be part of the Knights. She is actually intrigued by Jude. She feels like he's a kindred spirit. She relates to him a lot, and they both just are drawn to each other from the very beginning. The whole premise of the book is that the sun hasn't risen in I think over 50 years, and the Knights, which Jude is the commander of, tasked to figure out a way to lift the curse. They go on one last mission to try to find a way to lift the curse and bring back the sun. There's a lot more that goes into it, but I don't want to give away too much because it's going to spoil the book. But I will say that I loved the writing. I loved the character development. I loved the world building. When I finished this book, I went on Goodreads and a lot of people were complaining that there wasn't a lot of world building. I honestly disagree. I think there was just the perfect amount of world building. Sometimes when I read fantasy books, I'm so incredibly bored because the author spends so much time building up the world and not enough time introducing the characters. With this one, I feel like the author struck a really good balance where obviously there was a lot of world building. She set the scene. You really got to imagine and put yourself in the character's shoes, but it wasn't overwhelming and you still got to know the main characters. You still got to know the side characters, and I just really loved that. I loved Jude. He is just perfection. I loved him so much, and I really like that this book is actually dual POVs. You got the male main character's POV and the female main character's POV, and it just kept the book moving at a really good speed. I was not bored. I read this book within 24 hours, which is a feat as a mom. Nowadays, it takes me about 2 to 3 days to finish one book. This one I read within 24 hours because I could not put it down. I stayed up way past my bedtime to finish this book. I loved it so much. I also ended on a big cliffhanger, and I'm so sad that I have to wait until December of this year to wait for the sequel to come out. I'm so excited. I'm going to pre-order the sequel, and I'm very happy. I found a new fantasy author that I actually enjoy, and I can't wait to check out all of her other books. This was an immediate 5-star read for me. It also reminded me a lot of Fourth Wing, which is one of the reasons why I liked it so much. Both the characters are very strong. They're not whiny. They're very opinionated. Kiara does not back down even when she should. She's a little impulsive, but that's to be expected with her age and with everything that she has gone through. And there were a lot of plot twists in this book as well, and it just kept me on my toes. I loved it. Definitely check it out. If you enjoy Fourth Wing, then I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy this book as well. The next 5-star read for me was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This book made me tear up so many times. I loved it. I freaking loved it. I still think about this book, and I finished it a few weeks ago. It is the perfect beach read, and I love Abby's writing because she writes realistic books with relatable characters and with situations that can actually happen in real life. This book follows two main characters, Emma and Justin. They're both struggling with the same curse, so to speak. Every time they break off a relationship, their significant other or former significant other goes on to find the love of their lives. They end up getting married, and Justin and Emma are left like, okay, well, when are we going to get our happily ever after? And Justin actually writes a whole Reddit thread about his curse, and it ends up going viral. Emma ends up reaching out to him being like, hey, I actually have the same curse. They actually end up hitting it off through the Reddit DMs, which is really funny. They end up being in the same place for the summer, hence Just for the Summer. They end up going on dates together to try to end their curse, with the idea that if they break up with each other, their curse will kind of cancel each other out. But of course, life gets in the way. Emma has this really toxic mom that ends up showing up in her life and kind of messing with everything that's Emma built for herself. Justin actually has to take custody of his siblings, and through all that chaos, they're struggling to find time for themselves to explore this relationship. Emma has a lot of insecurities and a lot of trauma that she has to overcome. I related a lot to Emma's character on a personal level because I've been in similar situations that she's had, and I've had to deal with similar things in my life. So when she was going through certain things, it just brought me back to a certain time period in my life, and it honestly made me tear up because I felt for her and I knew what she was going through. So her character definitely hit me on a deeper level, which is why I think I fell in love with this book so much. I will say that I expected a little bit more of the ending. I felt like the ending was a little rushed. I really wanted more of it, and I didn't really agree with what Emma did at the end. I wish she would have done things differently, but then again, I kind of understand why she did things that she did and why she went about certain situations the way that she did. But overall, I just love the banter. I love the character development. I love the side characters. I just loved everything about this book. From the very beginning, I knew it was going to be a 5-star read for me. This is actually the third book in the Part of Your World series, and I think I gave Part of Your World 4 stars. I liked it, but I didn't love it. Then I gave Yours Truly, the second book in the series, 5 stars. Loved that book. And then this is the third book, another 5 stars. The characters in the first 2 books actually make an appearance in this book, and everything comes full circle. I think this book does a great job of tying every book in the series together, tying the characters together. So that's another thing that I really enjoyed about this book. Every character had a full circle moment and everything just came together perfectly. Well, perfectly imperfect, because there were a lot of deep, sad moments in this book, but I really enjoyed the romance between Justin and Emma. 5 stars, definitely read it. I think it's perfect to read during the summer because it takes place during the summer. I think it takes place in Minnesota, and I've never really cared to travel to Minnesota until I read this book, and I might have to take a trip to Minnesota now after reading just for the summer. And then the next 5-star read that I had was Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is another book that deals with real life situations, and it's just done in such a great way, and the writing was classic Emily Henry. Love the banter, love the scenery. It follows 2 main characters who are broken up with at the same time for the same reason. The female main character's fiance ends their engagement to start a relationship with his childhood best friend, who happens to be the male main character's girlfriend, and obviously she breaks it off with Miles, the male main character, to start a relationship with her childhood best friend. The female main character and the male main character end up being roommates because they have nowhere else to go. The female main character wants to leave the small town that they're in by the end of the summer to try to figure out who she is as a person, and she doesn't feel like she needs to stay in the small town because she only moved to the small town to be with her fiance, who obviously has now moved on. And Miles throughout the book is trying to convince her to stay, basically trying to get her to open up and to accept the small town and not to try to run away just because her engagement didn't work out. And they end up going on these cute little dates, which is Miles' attempt to convince her to stay and to give the small town a chance. The writing, again, 10 out of 10, was perfect, and I really like Emily Henry's writing because, similar to Abby Jimenez, she writes her characters in such a way where they obviously have a lot of baggage that they have to overcome, and sometimes her characters have trauma that they have to overcome as well. Character growth is always 10 out of 10. You can't help but root for her characters. You can't help but want her characters to succeed and the relationship to work out. She does banter so perfectly with just the right amount of sass, and her male main characters are just perfect. And the scenery in this book was also 10 out of 10, a perfect book to read during the summer as well. If you want a beach read that you're going to want to stay on the beach all day and read and not put down, then definitely pick up Funny Story. I think some people don't like Emily Henry's books because they're not really focused 100% on the romance. Like I said, Emily Henry writes her characters to have a bunch of character growth by the end of the book, and I know some people don't like that. Some people just read romance book for the romance, but I personally like reading romance books with characters that have a lot of growth at the end of the book and that go through real life shit, and it just makes the romance seem a lot more realistic. I also like that this one was kind of like a slow burn because not a lot happened till the very end. Even the first kiss in this book had me kicking and giggling because I just thought it was so well done. Highly recommend. I feel like I spent way too long talking about Funny Story, but here we are. Then we have Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I actually ended up giving this book a 4.75. It is a paranormal vampire and wolf marriage of convenience book. Misery ends up marrying Lo. Misery is a vampire, Lo is a werewolf. They end up marrying one another to try to bring the vampires and the werewolves together. They have hated each other for centuries, and this marriage is an attempt again to bring everyone together and to bring peace. They're kind of ingrained and taught to hate one another, but from the very beginning they're kind of drawn to one another and drawn to each other's scent, which sounds weird, but again, it's a paranormal romance, so keep that in mind. I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy it because Ali Hazelwood's books are always hit or miss for me, but I really enjoyed this book. It definitely is a slow burn. Not a lot happens between the 2 main characters until the very end of the book or close to the end of the book, but the slow burn is done so well. The male main character is also a grump, which I loved. Female main character can be described as a little grumpy too. She's definitely not Miss Sunshine whatsoever, but she's less grumpier than the male main character, and I just love how their relationship ends up playing out. I love the side characters. This is another book where both characters had a lot of growth as well, and I just really enjoyed it, so highly recommend. The rest of the books I'm going to talk about I either read through Kindle Unlimited or through Libby. I read One Summer in Savannah through Libby, and I ended up giving this book a 3-star rating, I want to say. This book takes place during the summer in Savannah, Georgia, and it follows a female main character who was actually sexually assaulted, and from that assault she actually ended up getting pregnant, leaves her small town and moves, I think, to Maine, if I remember correctly, to raise her little girl. But her father ends up getting sick and she has to go back to the small town after after 8 years have passed. Obviously, it's not an easy decision for her to make since it was such a small town. Everyone kind of turned on her and blamed her for what happened instead of blaming the person that was actually found guilty of assaulting her. I have to be careful with the words I use because YouTube is very strict with the words. It's just so stupid because you should be able to call things what they are, but I have to be very careful. Okay, so she ends up meeting her R word identical twin brother. The reason why I ended up giving this book 3 stars, despite actually enjoying the writing and really enjoying the topic that was being tackled, I found it very hard to believe that the female main character had fallen in love with her R word's identical twin brother. I would understand if maybe they weren't identical twins, but they were identical twins. And to me, I couldn't wrap my head around falling in love with my R word identical twin and not confusing the two. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't see past that. I also didn't like the ending. Some people might like the ending because it's kind of realistic in real life. It's not tied in a neat little bow, but I just didn't find the ending all that realistic. The way the R word's identical twin brother kind of maneuvered his way into the female main character's life just didn't seem realistic at all. So although I enjoyed the writing and this book definitely tackled the topic of forgiveness, grief, moving on, being a survivor, not a victim, although I enjoyed the way the author tackled those topics, I just couldn't get past the romance element. Maybe I'm alone in thinking like that. Let me know in the comments if you read this book and you felt the same way, but I would highly recommend this book because, like I said, I did enjoy how the author tackled the other topics like forgiveness, moving on, grief. Loved the writing. I just didn't like the romance element. Then I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I ended up giving this book a 3.75. I read this book through Libby as well. I liked how unique the plot was. It follows a female main character who inherits her aunt's apartment, and her aunt's apartment is actually magical and has the ability to send the occupants 7 years in the past or 7 years in the future. In the female main character's case, the apartment actually sends her back 7 years. She ends up meeting a guy who is staying at her aunt's apartment 7 years ago. Her aunt actually recently passed away, so throughout the book, the female main character is dealing with the grief, dealing with her aunt's death, and she's also learning how to be her own person and not be the person that she thinks everyone else wants her to be. So I really loved how the author tackled grief. Wow, I read a lot of books that tackle grief. So my memory card ran out of storage and I don't know what I was saying. Oh, I was talking about The 7-Year Slip. Now I remember. Okay, so yes, the female main character ends up meeting a guy. Again, it takes place 7 years in the past. It's alternating timelines in a way because you obviously see how they met and how they're interacting in the apartment 7 years ago, which for the female main character is actually the present time. And then they end up meeting again in the present time, but the male main character is 7 years older, if that makes sense. And he's a lot different than who he was 7 years ago, which is understandable. And I really liked how magical the writing felt. I liked the two main characters. I didn't love them, which is probably why I didn't rate this book higher. I also didn't really like how the female main character acted so shocked that the male main character had changed in the span of 7 years. She knew what the apartment did. She knew that she was meeting someone who was 7 years in the past. For some reason, she thought that he would stay the same and be the exact same person he was 7 years ago. And I'm like, girl, who stays the same in the span of 7 years? Like, you want to continuously grow as a person, and she wasn't even the same person herself that she was 7 years ago. So I didn't understand why she was so upset that he wasn't exactly the same person that he was 7 years ago. I understand certain aspects of him, like losing his spark, losing his motivation of why he wanted to become a chef, things like that I could understand, and because of that I couldn't really get behind the romance and connect with the two characters at all. And although I liked the writing, it kind of just felt flat. I would recommend it if you enjoy Ashley Poston's writing. Like, I read The Dead Romantics a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. This book gave me similar magical vibes to that one, but it definitely isn't my favorite book. The next book that I read was Mountains Made of Glass by Scarlett St. Clair, and a few years ago I actually read A Touch of Darkness by her. Mountains Made of Glass is actually a fairy tale retelling, which is why I decided to give it a chance because I'm a sucker for fairy tale retellings. I love them. This one fell flat for me for the same reasons A Touch of Darkness fell flat for me. Basically, Mountains Made of Glass is a fairy tale retelling. I think it's Beauty and the Beast, but don't quote me on that. It follows a female main character who is sent as a prisoner to this Fae. I think he's called Fae, I don't even know. In order to gain her freedom, she has to figure out his true name in 7 days. But there's a catch. No one else knows his true name. He knows his true name, but if it's 7 days, his prisoner, the female main character, doesn't figure out his real name, he'll forget his name forever, which means that everyone will forget his existence and he will just cease to exist. The catch is that she has to be in love with him when she figures out his name. And because of this book definitely feels insta-lovey and insta-lusty as well. I don't even know if that's a word, but it was too much smut right from the get-go. I thought I would give Scarlett's writing a second chance because I didn't think all her books were so smut heavy, but I'm getting the impression that they're all heavy on the smut. I will say that I enjoyed the fairy tale-esque vibe of the book. I just didn't enjoy how heavy on the smut it was. I do think if you like smut and you like reading books solely because of the smut, then you'll really enjoy this book. But if you're looking for a book that has a nice balance of just a little bit of smut and heavy on the plot development and heavy on the romance, you're not going to enjoy this book, in my personal opinion. And for that reason, I don't think I'm going to continue the series. I think the second book comes out soon or later this year, and I honestly have no interest in reading the rest of the series or reading any other book by Scarlett. And then I read Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Reaver. I ended up giving this book a 3.5. I really enjoyed the plot of this book. I thought it was really interesting. It's about 2 serial killers who kill other serial killers. I really loved that aspect. I loved how they went about killing other serial killers. I just wish the author had gone a little bit more in depth regarding the female main character's trauma. I think she skirted around it a little bit and was very intentionally vague. I don't know why. Maybe she'll go more into the main character's past in the second book, but I just wanted to learn more about the female main character so I could connect with her a little bit more and understand why she was doing the things that she was doing. But I really enjoyed the characters' banter and I love the side characters. I'm actually really excited for the second book. I just wish that the author had given us more background on the characters, like past and why they did what they did. Then I read Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I ended up giving this book a 4-star rating. I really loved this book. I read Same Time Next Summer by her last year, loved it, so I decided to give Nora Goes Off Script a chance. This is actually one of her most popular books. I see a lot of people talking about Nora Goes Off Script. It follows a single mom of 2 kids who ends up writing a movie. A Hollywood director ends up purchasing it. They end up filming 2 days at her house, and the movie is actually based on her own life, how her marriage ended with her ex-husband, and through them filming, she actually meets the star of the movie. He ends up staying with her once the 2 days of filming wraps up, and they end up spending a lot of time together and connecting with one another. I loved how they went about starting off their romance, and I loved how it was also super realistic, and well, maybe not super realistic because like how many single moms are actually writing a Hollywood blockbuster, you know what I mean? But I loved the scenery. It was a very small town during the summer. I loved how the author didn't just focus on the romance, she also focused on the struggles of being a single mom, feeling like you're not enough, not wanting to hurt your kids by sharing the truth of who their father is, of trying to excuse their father's bad behavior so they don't get hurt, and also accepting the fact that, you know, you are better off being a single mom than being stuck in a marriage that is just not bringing anything to the table, it's not fulfilling you in any way, and your husband's disrespecting you. The one thing I didn't like was the huge miscommunication trope that was in this book, and I feel like the main conflict could have been solved had the 2 main characters actually just been honest with one another and talked to one another openly. Seeing that they were a lot older, the female main character was a single mom, I would expect her to be more open to communicating, but neither of the 2 characters were open to communicating, and the whole conflict that lasted way too long could have just been avoided had they been honest with one another and had an open conversation. But everything else, I loved it. The scenery, the romance, the struggles that were portrayed in this book, I loved everything else. It was just the miscommunication trope that I did not enjoy. And then I also read To Swoon and To Spar, which is the 4th book in the Regency Vows by Martha Waters. I've actually never read any of the books in the series. I ended up reading To Swoon and To Spar through Libby. I have been obsessed with Libby. I gave this book a 3-star rating. It is a historical fiction romance. It has paranormal elements to it as well. It follows 2 main characters who are actually arranged to be married. They end up getting married and moving to the male main character's childhood home. The home appears to be haunted. It's just a very cozy book. It starts off in April if I remember correctly, and the scenery is just very cold and very cozy. I felt like I was being wrapped up in a blanket while I was reading this book. And I really liked that the female main character was very headstrong. She was stubborn, she was sassy, especially given the fact that it's a historical romance, so it takes place in the past, and normally women of that era were told to be quiet, to not speak up, and she's the complete opposite of that. So I enjoyed that. I just felt like the author tried to write off the female main character as shy, but there's a difference between being shy and being rude, and some of the times, a lot of times, the female main character was just straight up rude, and you can't really blame shyness on that. Other than that, if you're looking for a cozy historical romance with good characters and good character growth, definitely check out this book because I enjoyed it. I think I'm going to check out her other books as well if I can find them on Libby. I'm gonna try to speed this up because I've been sitting here for way too long. I also read An Island Summer by Jenny Hill. I love Jenny Hill's writing. I read a lot of her Christmas books, so I decided to give her beach reads a chance, and Island Summer follows a female main character who ends up going to her childhood home, which happens to be her grandfather's home. He unfortunately passed away recently. She decided to go back and try to figure out her life while she lives at her grandfather's house. It is in a small beach town, so she gets a job waitressing, and through her spending time in this small town and living in this small town, she actually meets an older man who is around the same age as her grandfather that passed, and she immediately feels like a kinship to him. She immediately feels drawn to him. Unfortunately, he has dementia, and he ends up confusing her with a person from his past. It's a book that tackles grief, moving on, and figuring out what you want in life and being okay with where you are in life while looking towards the future and taking a chance on yourself, which I really loved those elements. It fell flat in the romance department. I feel like there wasn't really any spark between the two main characters, and nothing really happened with them until the very end. They didn't really even go on dates or anything. I feel like this book isn't heavy on romance. It definitely focused more on following the character's journey, seeing her grow as a person and come to terms with her life, and grieving her grandfather. And there was a little plot twist here and there, but it definitely wasn't a book heavy on romance. If you want a beach read that isn't really romantic in nature and just focus on character development and character growth, and also makes you feel like you're being wrapped up in a little blanket, definitely check out this book. But if you're looking for a book that's heavy on romance, I wouldn't recommend this one. But I did enjoy Jenny's writing. I love Jenny's writing. She has a way of, again, making you feel like you're drinking a big hot cup of tea or hot cocoa. I'm definitely going to continue to read her books. This one just wasn't my favorite. Then I read Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I really wanted to love this book. It is technically a Grumpy Sunshine second chance romance, but it focused too much on the female main character's career and not enough on the romance, where it felt kind of flat for me. So it follows a female main character who is a wedding planner, but she doesn't believe in marriages because her mom has been married like 14 times or something crazy like that. So she loves the idea of planning a party and planning a big wedding, but she never wants to have a relationship. She never wants to get married herself, and she ends up meeting another man, male main character, who happens to be a florist. And obviously, because she's a wedding planner, he's a florist, they work a lot together, and through them working together, they end up starting a relationship, kind of like a friends with benefits. The thing is, he wants more out of the relationship, and she, again, does not want a relationship, even though throughout the book you see her do things with him that would classify a relationship, like planning trips to go away, spending every waking moment with each other, even working in his florist shop, making plans to become business partners, doing all these things that to a normal person would say, okay, we're in a relationship, but then denying that they're in a relationship. That irks me so bad. And it's also told in alternating timelines. So you see their past relationship play out through the male main character's eyes, and then you see in present time them collabing together after breaking up, but they're collabing for a huge wedding. And I just didn't really like it because it spent too much time in the past and not enough time in the present. Chapters that were told in the present time, they really didn't spend a lot of time together, and a lot of the book was focused on, again, their past and focused on the female main character's job as a wedding planner. And I don't care about wedding planning. I am married, and even when I was getting married, I couldn't care less about wedding planning. To me, marriage is what's important, not the party that is thrown. I know everyone's different, but I just don't really care about wedding planning. And a lot of the book was spent on the female main character's job as a wedding planner. And because of that, the book definitely fell flat, and the ending just didn't feel genuine at all because, like I said, really didn't get to see the two characters interact all that much in the present time. A lot of the chapters were focused on their past and on why their relationship ended. I feel like the male main character deserved more, if I'm being honest. I ended up giving this book a 2.7 4.75. Those are all the books that I read in April and May. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my reviews. Also, let me know in the comments below how your reading months went. I would love to know. I feel like I talked way too much, way too long. Sorry if this video is a million years long. I can talk forever about books, and sometimes I do. So sorry if this video is really long and if I went on rants, but hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.